Imagine this, folks. It's the crack of dawn on the Western Front, and the sky looks like someone smeared ash and cold steel across it. The kind of morning that feels like the world itself forgot what warmth is, and you've got American doughboys crouched in the mud, boots soaked, fingers numb, breath fogging like tiny ghosts drifting into the trench air, all waiting for another day inside the world's most miserable slice of hell. And as the whistle screams across the line, you hear guys cuss under their breath, some muttering prayers, others lighting their last cigarette like it's a middle finger to death, and the ground shakes from distant artillery rolling in like thunder with bad intentions, yet everything is deadly quiet right where they stand. Because 24 hours in these trenches ain't about non-stop gunfire. It's about the suspense, the boredom, the stink of old water, sweat, rot, and fear mixed together like some cursed soup nobody asked for. And the boys try to keep themselves sane with dark jokes, talking about home, about mom's cooking, about how they'd give anything for a warm shower or a real bed again. But the sergeant walks by, reminding them the Krauts are barely 100 yards out, their machine guns pointed right at 'em, and one wrong move turns you into a headline. So the men settle in for the grind, the endless waiting game where every sound could mean trouble, every vibration could be a shell, and every minute feels like 10, all while rats the size of house cats run across their boots like they own the place, and the lads swear these rats eat better than they do. And as the morning drags on, the trench becomes its own twisted little world with its own rhythm. Swap guard duty, check rifles, patch sandbags, sip whatever lukewarm coffee sludge survived the night, and pretend the shrieks from no man's land aren't real. But don't worry, we're just getting warmed up, because surviving the first few hours is easy. It's when night falls again that things start getting real dark, real fast. And trust me, the next part we dive into is where the nerves start cracking, the shells start walking closer, and the line between bravery and desperation gets real blurry, real quick. As the day drags into the ugly stretch of afternoon, the trench feels tighter, like the mud walls are inching closer every hour. And the doughboys keep glancing over the parapet, even though they know sticking their head up too far is just asking to get it taken clean off. But curiosity kills more than cats out here. It kills patience, it kills nerves, and sometimes it kills men who just want to see if the enemy is moving. And the sun, barely visible behind that endless smoke haze, only makes the place hotter, stickier, turning every breath into something you gotta chew before swallowing. And the sergeant calls for a listening post shift, meaning 2 poor souls gotta crawl out into no man's land and sit in a tiny shell crater for hours, keeping their ears open for enemy movement. So 2 guys, Miller and Jennings, grab their gear, slap mud on their faces like cheap camouflage, and slither over the edge, disappearing into that dead zone where the air always feels colder, like the ghosts of the fallen are still breathing through it, while the rest of the squad watches them vanish and pretends not to think about the 100 ways they could die before sunset. But back inside the trench, things aren't much better.
There's a wounded guy muttering nonsense from fever. A pot of coffee burning on a small stove that smells like old socks and misery. And the steady drip, drip, drip of water sliding down the timber supports, a sound every soldier swears is slowly driving them insane. And yet, even with all this, the boys keep talking, telling stories about baseball games and county fairs, anything to remind each other that life isn't just mud and fear. But halfway through a joke about someone's hometown sheriff, the ground shivers with that deep, stomach-dropping rumble that means enemy artillery has woken up. And seconds later, the first shells scream overhead, exploding somewhere behind their line, showering dirt down like angry rain. And everyone freezes, hearts racing, waiting to see if the next ones hit closer. And sure enough, they do. Each blast marching nearer like footsteps of some giant beast stomping toward them. But they grit their teeth, huddle down, clutch their rifles, and promise themselves they won't break. Not today. Even as dust fills their lungs, the trench rattles like a tin can, and every man silently wonders if this hour will be the one that wipes them off the earth. Still they hold, because in this place, holding on is the only victory they can claim until the next sunrise. As the aftermoon fades and the sky bleeds into that sickly orange-gray twilight, the trench starts to change. It gets quieter, colder, and somehow even more claustrophobic, like the whole world is holding its breath before the night's madness begins. Because everyone knows night in the trenches ain't peaceful. It's when the whispers turn into paranoia, when every shadow feels alive, when the enemy likes to sneak in close, and when the fear hits you in ways daylight can't, and the doughboys brace themselves for it as the last of the artillery thunders off into the distance, leaving behind a ringing silence that makes the men twitchy. So they check rifles again, straighten their bayonets, pull jackets tighter, and swap out the guard rotation first thing, with Johnson and Webb taking the first watch, even though Johnson's hands are shaking like he's cold. But he ain't cold. He's scared, the kind of scared that sticks to your bones like frost. And Webb just nudges him with a grin like, "Hey man, if a crowd pops up, I'll let you shoot first," because humor is the duct tape holding these guys together. But while they're settling into their posts, word comes down that Miller and Jennings, the two poor guys out on the listening post, haven't signaled back yet, which is bad, real bad, because twilight is the danger hour, the time when patrols move, when snipers take their last shots, when wounded men cry out louder because the dark makes pain heavier. And as the sergeant squints into no man's land with his binoculars, everyone else feels that creeping dread, like something out there is watching them, waiting for the moment someone slips, and then suddenly, boom, there's this short, sharp crack of a rifle from the German side echoing across the emptiness, and the whole trench snaps to attention, freezing, listening, breathing like they're afraid to make a sound. And a few seconds later they hear it, someone screaming from the darkness, a choked, panicked yell that sounds like Miller begging for help. And the men's hearts sink hard, because going out there after dark is suicide, but leaving a brother to die is even worse. And the sergeant curses under his breath, trying to decide whether to send a rescue team or hold the line, because both choices could kill them, and the trench suddenly feels smaller, tighter, charged with a desperation that makes every man's pulse race. And as night finally settles in, thick as ink, The doughboys know this next hour is gonna define who survives and who becomes just another name in the mud. Darkness drops over the front like somebody pulled a tarp across the whole world, and the trench turns into this long, crooked coffin of shadows, where every breath feels too loud, and every heartbeat sounds like it's echoing off the mud walls, and the sergeant, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth, finally makes the call. He's sending a two-man rescue team after Miller, because even though it's damn near suicidal, nobody's leaving a fellow doughboy to get dragged off by the Germans or bleed out alone in the dirt. So he picks Donovan and Price, two guys who move quiet and think fast. And they smear more mud on their faces, tighten their straps, and crawl over the parapet like ghosts slipping out of the earth, disappearing into a blackness so thick it swallows them whole, while the rest of the squad watches with their guts twisted, listening, praying, hoping, because all they can hear is the distant groan of the battlefield, wind hissing through barbed wire, some wounded German moaning somewhere far off, the crackle of small fires burning in shell craters. No man's land at night ain't silent. It's alive, and it's hungry. And while Donovan and Price vanish into it, the trench itself shifts into full tension mode. Rifles up, helmets low, everyone scanning the darkness for movement, because if the Germans catch on that a rescue is happening, they'll rain bullets down like a damn hailstorm. And just when the waiting starts eating at their nerves, another sound slips through the air. Soft, dragging footsteps, getting closer from the left side of the trench, too slow to be confident, too uneven to be friendly. And the boys tense up, fingers tightening on triggers, eyes wide in the dark. And then a shape appears on the fire step, stumbling forward and collapsing against the sandbags. And for a second, nobody knows who or what it is, until a weak, familiar voice mutters, "Help me, it's Jennings." And the men rush forward, pulling him inside, mud-soaked, bleeding from a graze across his cheek, shaking like he's been dipped in ice water. And he gasps out that Miller's still out there, but he ain't screaming anymore. That something moved between them out in the dark, something crawling low, fast, quiet, maybe a German patrol, or maybe something worse, because out here fear grows teeth. And the sergeant curses again, hard, realizing Donovan and Price are walking straight into whatever Jennings just escaped from. And the trench suddenly feels colder, sharper, like danger is crouching just beyond the wire, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And all the doughboys can do is hold their breath and wait for a gunshot, a scream, or the enemy to come pouring out of the night. Minutes drag like hours, the kind of stretched thin time that makes every man feel older, tighter, wound up like a spring ready to snap. And the trench sits in absolute dead quiet, except for the soft rasp of Jennings trying to breathe through pain. And the sergeant crouches beside him, whispering fast, trying to squeeze details out. What direction, how many shapes, what exactly he saw. But Jennings just keeps shaking his head, mumbling that he doesn't know, that the dark felt alive, that he heard German voices, but also something else, something crawling, scraping, like metal on stone, which makes no sense because there ain't nothing out there but mud and bones. And while the men try to process that, a soft pop echoes from no man's land, the sound of a flare gun. And seconds later, the sky ignites with this harsh white light that floods the battlefield like a spotlight from heaven. turning shadows into sharp edges and painting no man's land in icy silver. And right there in the middle of that hellish spotlight, they see movement. Donovan and Price, flat on their stomachs, dragging Miller's limp body through the mud inch by inch, faces twisted with effort and terror, because the flare didn't just light them up, it lit everything up, including the German trenches. And before anyone can yell a warning, the enemy machine gun nest spots them and opens fire with that ripping metallic roar that shakes the air. Bullets tearing across the field, kicking up dirt, slicing into the ground so close the sparks look like fireflies gone crazy. And the doughboys inside the trench explode into action, rifles up, firing back, shouting, screaming, ducking, the whole line erupting like a kicked beehive. But even through the chaos, they can see Donovan still crawling, still pulling Miller, refusing to leave him, even as rounds zip past his head, while Price swings his rifle toward the machine gun nest, firing wildly to buy seconds, just seconds of cover. But the Germans start shifting fire, bracketing them, walking the shots closer, and the sergeant yells at the top of his lungs for suppressing fire, and the men oblige, unleashing everything they've got in the direction of the muzzle flashes, their rifles cracking like snapping wood. But the flare starts to fade, the light bleeding out, sinking the field back into thick darkness, just as Donovan and Price reach the wire. And two men at the trench grab ropes, throw them out, and pray the rescuers can latch on before the next flare goes up. Because if the Germans fire another one, if they light up that field again, Donovan, Price, and maybe even Miller are done, gone, ripped apart before they ever reach safety. And the whole squad is teetering on that razor edge between hope and horror, hearts pounding in their throats as they listen, waiting for the sound of hands grabbing rope, or the sound of someone dying in the dark.
For a moment, the darkness feels total, thick, suffocating, like it's crushing every sound before it can escape. But then, faint as a whisper, they hear it, the scrape of boots dragging, the grunt of someone pulling their whole weight with their arms, and suddenly a pair of hands slap onto the rope, tugging hard, and the trench crew leans back with everything they've got, hauling like fishermen trying to reel in a catch that weighs as much as their own fear. And through the murk, Donovan's voice cuts through, strained, shaking, pull, pull, just as the Germans fire off another flare, this one shooting into the air like a dying star before exploding into brutal white glare. And the whole field becomes visible again, brutally clear, showing Donovan and Price just feet from safety, Miller slumped between them like a sack of wet canvas. And behind them, God help them, two German stormtroopers breaking from their trench, charging low, fast, bayonets gleaming in the ghost light, their shadows stretched long and monstrous across the torn earth, and Price whips around, firing a single desperate shot that whizzes past them, missing by inches, while Donovan digs his fingers into the mud, pushing Miller forward, as the boys in the trench pull like their lives depend on it, because they do, and bullets from the machine gun nest start rattling again, chewing into the dirt behind the rescuers, sparks flying like angry fireflies, and the sergeant roars for more suppressing fire, and the doughboys empty their rifles, sending round after round into the German line, the noise deafening, the air alive with gun smoke and panic.
And just as the two stormtroopers close the last few yards, Price hurls himself backward, swinging his rifle like a club, smashing the buttstock into the first attacker's face with a crack that echoes like breaking bone, buying them one precious second, just one, before the trench crew yanks the rope with a final, brutal pull, dragging all three men over the lip of the trench where they crash into the mud in a heap just as the flare burns out, plunging no man's land back into suffocating darkness, leaving only the thunder of gunfire, frantic breathing, and the sickening realization that while they saved their brothers, the night's far from over, and the enemy, angry, alert, and now fully aware of the Americans' position, might already be preparing something far worse in retaliation.
The trench is chaos for a few seconds, men shouting from medics, boots splashing through mud, rifles being reloaded with trembling hands, while Donovan, Price, and Miller lie there gasping like they've just clawed their way out of a grave. And a medic rushes in, sliding next to Miller, checking for a pulse before muttering, "He's alive, barely," which hits the squad like a gut punch of relief. But nobody gets time to breathe because Jennings, still shaking on the ground, points toward no man's land with wide, terrified eyes and whispers, "They're coming. I heard them. More than two." And the sergeant snaps to attention, scanning the darkness, his instinct screaming that the Germans aren't going to let a rescue like that go unanswered. Stormtroopers don't move alone, they move in packs. They stalk, they flank, they hit hard when you're still catching your breath. And just as he starts barking orders to tighten the line, the night shifts again. Soft crunches in the distance, boots moving in unison, the faint metallic clink of gear bumping gear. The kind of careful, coordinated sound that makes every man freeze. Because it ain't random, not animals, not the wind. That's soldiers, lots of them, moving with purpose. And suddenly this cold realization hits the squad that the enemy might be gearing up for a trench raid, one of those brutal, up-close, no-room-to-think ambushes where the fighting is done with knives, clubs, bayonets, anything that kills fast and quiet. And the doughboys start checking their gear, securing helmets, wiping sweat from their hands, gripping rifles so tight their knuckles go white. All while the sergeant whispers down the line, "Fix bayonets, now." And the metallic click of steel locking in place cuts through the dark like tiny alarms, and the air shifts into that heavy electric tension right before something awful breaks loose. And the men feel it, every single one of them, that primal fear deep in the gut, the kind that says you're about to fight for your life, not with distance, not with bullets, but face to face with another human being who wants you dead. And the worst part is, the Germans still haven't shown themselves, which is somehow scarier than seeing them, because the unknown in this darkness feels like it has teeth. And the doughboys crouch low, hearts pounding, breath held, waiting for the first shadow to jump the wire, and praying they're ready when it happens.
The sounds in the darkness creep closer, slow, rhythmic, full of intent, and every doughboy tightens their grip, breath held, waiting for that first silhouette to crash over the wire. But then, out of nowhere, a single German flare streaks into the sky, bursting open with a harsh white glow that blankets the entire battlefield, turning the world silver and terrifyingly clear. And the squad braces for impact, but what they see instead freezes them in place. A full German raiding party crouched low just beyond the wire, helmets gleaming in the ghost light, weapons ready, eyes locked on the American trench. Yet just as they shift forward to charge, a sudden deafening barrage erupts from the American artillery behind the line, a perfect stroke of timing or a miracle, no one knows. But those shells come screaming down like the wrath of God, exploding across no man's land in blinding bursts, tearing up earth, wire, and bodies in brutal flashes that shake the ground under the doughboys' boots. And the German raiders scatter, some diving into craters, others scrambling back toward their trench, all thoughts of attack ripped away by the sheer violence of the bombardment. And the Americans watch in stunned silence, the light fading, the night returning, but the threat, finally, broken. After a few long minutes, the barrage quiets, leaving behind a world of drifting smoke and ringing ears. And slowly the squad exhales, some laughing from shock, some wiping tears they'd never admit to, all of them realizing they've survived a night that should have ended them 10 times over. And as they slump down against the mud walls, the sergeant nods once, proud and tired, muttering, "Get some rest, boys. Dawn's coming." And for the first time in 24 hours, the trench feels less like a coffin and more like a place where men held their ground, saved their brothers, and lived to tell the tale, even if sleep comes slow and haunted. And when the first faint glow of morning brushes over the horizon, painting the shattered landscape gold, every man knows one thing for sure. No one back home will ever understand what a single night in the trenches truly costs, but they'll carry it with them forever. And that, folks, was 24 hours in the trenches. The kind of nightmare our great-grandfathers survived with grit, luck, and a whole lot of heart. If you felt the tension, the fear, the brotherhood, if you could almost see that battlefield in your mind, then do me one big favor. Hit that like button, smash that subscribe, and drop a comment telling me what part hit you the hardest. Your support keeps these stories alive, and it helps this channel grow so we can keep bringing history to life, one story at a time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay curious, and keep the past alive.